Welcome to our 3 dubs, where your favourite fanfiction stories come to life through immersive text-to-speech narration. Sit back, relax, and let the words take you on an unforgettable journey. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Chapter 3 Gameplay. Present day. The pilot's voice broke through the 3 FBI agents mentally preparing on the flight. Please prepare for landing and make sure your safety belts are fastened. We'll be arriving at the airfield in 5 minutes. Steve looked at his teammate sitting across from him on the small military plane. He heard Sam break the silence first. Hey Buck, does it ever bother you that Fury still calls Wanda Maximoff? It was a random question, but it did the trick, shaking them out of their thoughts. Bucky grinned and let out a chuckle. Nah. Why would I be upset if Wanda isn't he? Besides, she finds it endearing to hear Fury still call her that. It's how he knew her at the academy when we all first met, so I guess that's how he'll always know her. As the men buckled up and turned on their communication devices, Sam smirked, Fury and the term endearing in the same sentence. Now there's something to really laugh about. As the plane began descending, the air pressure in the cabin shifted along with the tension in the air. Bucky looked over at Steve before turning back to Sam and said, "This is it. We're finally going to get him this time." Sam added, "Buck, it has to be, but we've been after this guy for so long that it seems like we've been chasing a fucking illusion," Bucky scoffed, "or a fucking ghost." Enough. Steve's voice rang over theirs. "Yes, this is it. Stop giving him credit for bad info or botched leads we've had in the past. He is not an illusion or a magician. And he is not a ghost. He is a goddamn criminal. We've been over the intel 100 times, it is solid." "Steve, don't you think it is a little odd?" Sam said before looking at Bucky. Bucky let out a breath and finished, "We've been through this game of his before and have come up empty-handed every time." Steve cut them both off with a sterner tone. "None of that matters," he motioned between the 3 of them. "This team is a more solid lead than it has had in years for one of the FBI's most wanted criminals. The asshole is going down. Today." "The guys," Wanda's voice came through their earpieces. "Remember, cooler heads always prevail. So keep your wits about you this morning. He's going to use every piece of knowledge he has on us, and against us if he can, so everyone has to stay calm." Fury added, "Maximoff is right. Everyone may have a history here, but this isn't about that. No matter how much he might try to bring it up. It is about his crimes. Stay focused and bring me that son of a bitch." Bucky, Steve, and Sam's voices rang in unison. "Yes, sir." 5 minutes later, they were loading their gear into the black SUV that was waiting for them on the landing strip. For 25 minutes, Sam drove as Bucky checked their weapons, and Steve communicated with Wanda about their GPS location and destination. Turning off the main road and onto a dirt path, the SUV followed a dried-out waterway and weaved through barren fields for 2 miles. Sam slowed down and brought the vehicle to a halt at the bottom of a hill as the wind swirled outside. At the top of that hill, the agents saw what they were looking for, an overgrown acreage with an abandoned 2-story farmhouse. The yard was covered with dead patches of earth and weeds. An old hog barn stood to the north of the house, and several rickety sheds were to the west. Most of the paint on the house had been scratched off slowly over time from weather and branches on unkempt trees. It appeared almost grey, almost dead. Their senses were heightened in the wind. A shed door creaked. Branches struck repeatedly against wood siding, and dirt whirled around them from the desolate landscape. It all looked and sounded like something from a horror movie. The SUV was silent for a few seconds before Steve said, "We're out of sight down here, but as soon as we approach, we have to protect the direct line to the vehicle. This is our only way out unless we want to hoof it back to the main road." Exiting the vehicle, Steve took command. He pointed his finger to Sam and then to the north, telling him silently to circle the house from the direction and cover the barn. He did the same to Bucky, but directed him towards the sheds to the west, so he could close in from the opposing side. Steve pointed to himself and indicating he would approach straight from the south, the line with the most exposure. The 3 of them nodded in affirmation to one another, checked their spare weapons in their holsters one more time, and drew their long rifles as they moved out. Climbing up the hill, Steve kept an eye on each team member for as long as he could. He called as he approached the crest, stopping right before the ground leveled. Dropping to his stomach, he watched his team move in opposite directions, and covered them from any possible fire. Sam used a large tree for cover along the way, and successfully reached the back of the hog barn. He peered through the jagged glass of 2 broken windows before moving inside. 30 seconds later he exited and gave his teammate the thumbs up, showing it deep and cleared. He moved closer toward Bucky's direction. Bucky quickly cleared the first shed and moved on to the next one as Sam approached. He circled around the perimeter of the last building and entered through the creaky barn door in the wind. Exiting a minute later, he and Sam nodded to Steve, signaling the perimeter was clear. Steve was about to move when he looked closer at the house again. He noticed something out of place. In the corner of the ledge between the first and second story, he caught a glimpse of a black, circular object. The tree branches whipped around as he looked through the scope of his rifle and thought to himself, shit. Still covered by the side of the shed, Bucky and Sam watched as Steve motioned with his hands. There was a camera overlooking the grounds. It was unlikely that the scope of the camera caught any of Sam or Bucky's movements, but if he moved and rose above the top of the hill, Steve would be dead in its sight. He pointed to both of them and communicated with his hands that they needed to cut the power to it. Bucky understood and indicated to Sam that he would lead. He started scaling the old lattice attached to the backside of the house, while Sam and Steve covered from their respective vantage points. Reaching the ledge on the second story, Bucky stayed away from the middle of the roof, knowing the structure was weakened. He approached the corner, looked down, and followed the cord to the camera, making sure it wasn't hooked up to anything explosive. Steve and Sam watched him reach into the back compartment of his holster to pull out a pocket knife. He grabbed a stick trapped in the gutter, knelt down to loop the camera cord around it, and cut it clean without having to make any further movements. Bucky climbed down quickly and nodded to Steve again as he and Sam separated to circle the rest of the house. Steve stood and whispered, "Go time him round 30 feet ahead to the first tree." He covered the team from his position. When he saw them appear near the porch, he sprinted the rest of the distance to meet them at the front entrance. Covering each other's backs, Rogers motioned and counted to 3. He kicked in the door and the team burst inside. The house was covered in dust and grime and smelled of mildew. They scoured the front area and moved quickly to the kitchen and bathroom. Steve could hear dripping sound and looked up to the ceiling, noticing several brown water spots. They moved into the living room and collectively tilted their heads. A white envelope sat in the middle of the empty space. Bucky and Sam covered it as Steve picked it up. He felt the outside and turned it over to see the initials R.W. and B written on the front. The initials obviously stood for Rogers, Wilson, and Barnes. He opened it and read the message written to the 3 of them. "Look to your leader, hypocrites, as you lie and kill in the service of lies and killers and call it justice. Only I am the one you call criminal. Prepare puny agents, for our past is about to come calling. Know you will be brought to your knees by your memories and reality. I am Loki, and I am burdened with glorious purpose. Shall we play a game?" "What the fuck?" Steve groaned as Sam whispered. "You've got to be shooting me." "More games." "Or a trap," Bucky answered. Steve let out a long breath. He didn't realize he was holding. "Settle down. This is not a trap. Wanda and Bruce have scanned for any signs of life or explosives, and we cleared the area. No one else is here but him." Bucky and Sam nodded as Steve noticed shoe prints in a layer of dust going upstairs. "One at a time. No telling how sturdy these steps are," Steve instructed as he led the trio up the creaky staircase. Regrouping at the top, Steve whispered, 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. "Let us go." After checking the first 2 rooms and bathroom, they stood outside the 3rd bedroom. It was locked. For the second time in 20 minutes, Steve kicked down a door. They moved inside, and right in the middle of the empty room was the man they'd been looking for. Sitting crisscrossed on the floor, and his arms folded in his lap, he grinned and said to the agents, "Hello, old friends. Reunited at last. Oh, how I've missed this." Bucky and Sam pointed the guns as Steve reached down to bring him up to his knees and handcuffed him behind his back. "Loki, you're under arrest." 12 years ago. The physical test concluded earlier that afternoon. 95 out of the 100 trainees met the requirements. While 5 people would have to try again next time, everyone Steve had met the night before made it through with flying colours. The individuals from the hotel stood around in a group congratulating each other for making it through successfully. Sam joked, "You all know training and day 1 actually starts tomorrow." Bucky laughed. "I guess that means we need our beauty rest tonight then, right?" The group laughed and started to break off from one another. Loki, Banner, Stark, and Rhodes left first. Bucky walked over to Wanda. "Just so you know, I wasn't talking about you with the beauty rest. You clearly don't need any." Maria heard and mumbled, "Good God," and ran off to catch up with Thor, who was 50 yards ahead of her. Wanda raised an eyebrow and said, "Bucky, right? Did I hear that you were a soldier?" Thinking that his charm had worked, he grinned at her and said, "You heard right, darling." Wanda couldn't stop herself from literally scoffing at the line and almost coughed on the water she had been drinking. "Okay, Bucky. First, your nickname sounds as childish as your pick-up lines. Second, I don't know what type of girls you used to meeting in the military, but you better buckle up. You're in a whole new ballgame now. Bucky's face reddened, feeling embarrassed and defensive. Hey, people like my name. Wanda grinned, stepped forward, and patted his cheek lightly. I am not people. I like your real name, James. Now if you could only make me like that personality of yours. She ran off to meet the others, leaving Bucky, Sam, and Steve in her dust. James Buchanan Barnes had never cared for his first name. Bucky always just fit with Steve, his childhood friends, and the military. So hearing James from anyone else but Sarah Rogers felt odd until now. Hearing James from Wanda's voice. Well, it was the first time he could ever remember smiling to the sound of his birth name. Sam gave a low whistle as Steve laughed. The embarrassment returned quickly for Bucky. Oh, piss off, guys. You want to talk, Steve? Just an FYI, she's not around here anymore. Steve looked over to Sam for help, and Sam just laughed and added, Hey, she took off with the domes as soon as Fury separated the people being sent home. Steve tried to act like he didn't know what they were talking about. But he was a terrible liar, even when he wasn't. He outright trying to be dishonest. Bucky continued, Yeah. Don't even try to deny it, Steve. We all saw whatever was going on between you two on the track. You were like our rivals, like the Yankees and Red Sox or something. And it was all over sit-ups. Sam was laughing harder and added, Not, come on, Barnes. There were pull-ups too. What's the story with Romanoff, Steve? You know her or something from before? Steve could feel his face turning red, but was able to hide it in the sun and just started jogging backwards away from the men. He said, I definitely do not know her. Buck, you know how competitive I am. I wasn't going to take it easy on anyone out there, female or not. I'll catch you guys at dinner. Sam and Bucky stared at him as he ran off and both sarcastically said at the same time, rigged. As Steve made it back to his dorm, he stopped as he caught a glimpse of her red hair. Natasha was standing up on the hill in between the two housing units. She was staring out at the sunset, and she seemed different from this afternoon, and even from the previous night. He couldn't place it, but from the expression on her face seemed a piece of stark contrast from before. She had let her ponytail out, and she was surrounded by the orange and red hues of the sky. As cheesy as it sounded, she looked like she was almost glowing. Steve looked back to see if anyone would notice if he made a dash up the hill, but he decided to risk it. He thought, everyone is talking about us anyway, so what the hell? His curiosity and questions trumped his anger from earlier, and one thing was undeniable, he was still drawn to her, and he wanted answers. Natasha had footsteps approaching and was putting her hair back up when she heard Steve's voice. No need to do that on my account. It's not like I haven't seen your hair down before. Natasha turned around and watched him finish the climb up the hill. He had told her off about being dishonest before, so she was completely surprised to see him near her at the moment. I really am sorry, Steve. I can explain. He nodded. His frustration wasn't gone, it just wasn't strong right now. I hope so, Natasha. Why did you tell me you were meeting friends last night? Why didn't you tell me that you were joining the FBI, just like me? And why the heck did you lie about your name? Okay, she had apologized, but no, this was uncomfortable. Natasha used an easy defense mechanism and tried to make a joke. I guess you really not big on little white lies, huh? It landed about as well as the bodies did against the ground last night when they collided. Steve huffed for the record. I don't consider being dishonest about who you are and what your name is a little white lie. Try again. Well, aren't you just a beacon of truth and honesty and everything that the FBI is dreaming of? God, I bet they drooled when they first interviewed you. She started responding but stopped herself. This was not going the way she planned. The truth of the matter was that she was not the only one who had gotten under someone else's skin. She was annoyed that he had beaten her in the majority of the fitness tests. She was irritated by the whole good guy SH that he was portraying, and she was even more frustrated that it wasn't SH at all. That much. She was starting to realize. It was something she was not used to. At all. She threw her hands up in surrender for a second before folding them against her chest. Look, Steve. I am a private person, and sometimes I just don't use my first name. Last night, I guess it was just second nature. But my name is Natasha. She paused, waiting for Steve to respond. He continued to watch her, clearly expecting her to give him more. She let out a breath and said, And as for everything else, well, I don't actually think I have to explain anything to you, but I will. I was visiting people I knew last night when we bumped into one another. I had been out for my job just like you were, so I guess great minds think alike, right? Not taking to her attempt as a light joke, he made a motion with his hands for her to continue. She groaned, God, Steve, do your friends find you this exasperating? He did smile at that comment. The truth was yes. Yes, they did, but they also loved him for it. His smile was distracting her, but she continued, I didn't tell you I was part of the FBI training program because I had a crush, all right. We obviously had some crazy hormones going on in this weird connection. I thought if you knew I was going into the FBI too, you would have tried to be Mr. Official rule follower and would have gone back to the hotel right away. So I lied. And I am sorry. Really, Steve, I am sorry. I had a crush. That kept repeating over and over again in Steve's head. He had known it, and their instant attraction was obvious last night. But to hear her say it out loud through him, she could tell that she had knocked him off of his soapbox a little and stepped forward. Something tells me that my instinct was right about you being the rule follower. You wouldn't have let anything happen if you knew I was going to be here today. Admit it. Steve swallowed and let out a big breath and asked, You haven't answered all of my questions. Why do you run? Way to stay focused, Rogers. No wonder you were in the FBI, she smiled as he said, I am not in the FBI yet. As of today, I am officially in training. Why do you run? She bit her bottom lip before continuing, him. Why did I run? I didn't want to. God, I didn't want to, and I don't think you wanted me to either. But when those kids came in, it was like I was thrown into an ice bath. I knew you were going to be mad at me already when you found out I lied, and I didn't want to dig myself in deeper. So I ran. Plus, I knew I'd see you today. She took a breath as she finished, but I didn't realize what a stubborn and competitive ass you were going to be toward me. His anger and frustration had completely hightailed it out of his mind. All that was left was curiosity, wanting to accept the olive branch from Natasha's words, and the same attraction that was there the night before. Now it was Steve's turn to show his peace offering. You know you were not the first person to accuse me of being a stubborn ass. Natasha grinned as he continued, I do have a thing with honesty and lying though. Maybe sometime I'll get into our lives and pass truthfully, and you'll understand why. But as much as I really didn't want things to stop last night, I can see why you ran. So maybe I can see why you didn't tell me you were joining the FBI, just maybe. She relaxed as he voiced his acceptance. She put her arms down to her side in less of a defensive pose as he continued, but it's probably for the best it ended where it did. You might accuse me of being Mr. Official. Hell, I've already been called Gramps today, but I can't help it. It is who I am. I think it is best if we just start over and try to be friends over the next 5 months. Steve blew out a deep breath and shrugged his shoulders and smiled. He extended his hand and said, Natasha Romanoff, I am Steve Rogers, and it is really nice to meet you. Natasha looked up at him and let out a laugh. Why do I feel like your little speech was actually harder for you than mine was for me? And I was the one that needed to apologize. You made me big on honesty, but you sure aren't one to talk about feelings behind whatever walls you have up, are you? Even though you were able to do that with me last night. Steve stared at her like he had been punched in the gut. After not even 24 hours of knowing him, she had picked up on something profound and accurate about Steve. He answered, You were right, that wasn't easy for me. Trust between people tears down walls, so we can work on that as friends. Steve still had his hand out in front of him as Natasha looked down at it. She shrugged her shoulders and grabbed on to shake it. Nice to meet you, Steve Rogers. They both were trying to have a do-over. A reboot of their initial meeting. One thing was certain, though, the contact between their hands ignited the same reaction as it did the night before. Steve tried to appear calm, but he noticed goosebumps on her arm just as he did the first time and thought to himself again, Thank God, I am not the only one. Steve and Bucky spent the rest of the evening getting to know Sam, Tony, and Rhodes better through dinner and playing cards. Tony and Rhodes knew each other before arriving, and their banter could almost rival Steve and Bucky's. Rhodes was a good balance to Tony. Steve could tell after one evening that Stark was not a serious man by nature and tended to rely on his sarcasm and defense mechanisms. A lot. But morning came quickly. After breakfast, everyone was on their way to their first official day in the FBI training program. The day's exercises involved weapons assembly in the morning, followed by assessments of boxing skills and hand-to-hand combat in the afternoon. Huey was waiting for the class by the shooting range and stood in front of tables full of weapons. All right, everyone. Welcome to the first day of the rest of your lives. The trainees looked at each other as he continued. We're going to be assembling and disassembling the Springfield Professional Custom 45 ACP pistol, the 6-hour 9mm, and the Remington 12-gauge shotgun. There will be no shooting today. Once you show me you can handle the equipment, you can all have a little fun and try to show off later this week. Everyone partner up. Steve partnered with Bucky, followed by Stark with Rhodes. Loki with Thor, Wanda with Maria, and Banner with Sam. Natasha found the person she just met. The first teams went to the tables. Fury didn't hold back on the tongue lashing he gave to a couple of trainees who went in the first few groups. This is the FBI people. These weapons are our tools. Tools are a big part of how we keep America safe, so learn your shit. As for the people Steve started to become familiar with, Loki and Thor went first and both did a fair job. Rhodes and Stark went next. They were the best group that had gone so far, with Tony leading the way. They jokingly started calling each other Eagle Eye and Ace in code. Hill and Maximoff were quiet and focused, finishing with the second best time yet. Banner and Wilson were next, with Banner coming in behind Loki's time, and Sam finished in between Stark and Rhodes. Romanoff stepped in front of Rogers and Barnes with her partner Johnson was her last name. Steve thought and said, "Better take a picture, boys. You're going to want to remember this." Bucky rolled his eyes and Steve laughed, but their jaws dropped. Her partner's time was okay, but Natasha literally kicked everyone's ass with her assembly time, pushing Stark now into second place. Sam gave a low whistle as Maria gave a couple of genuine claps of her hand, showing how impressed she was. She returned to the group and walked close enough by Steve that their arms brushed lightly against one another as she said, "You might want to close your mouth, Rogers. You up next." His expression quickly turned into a smirk as Bucky smacked him on the shoulder, telling him silently, "Let us show them." Just as he was the day before, Steve was impressed by her. But this was an area that he and Bucky knew extremely well. They walked confidently up to the table as he stood on the opposite side of the group, and just before Fury told them to go, he looked over at Natasha and winked. Rogers and Barnes looked like they were performing an intricate dance, putting together their Springfield pistols and taking them apart. The clicks, snaps, and pops with each step filled the room like a roller coaster ticking up a hill. They put the pistols down, gave each other a cocky nod, and moved on to the 6-hour 9mm and 10mm. They did the same dance as they found their groove. Click, snap, pop. Voices were in the background, wondering if they would beat Romanoff first time, but Steve and Bucky blocked them out. Spending their whole lives together, and the previous 6 in the military, had more than prepared them. This was like second nature to them both. The sounds of the gunmetal played in Steve's head, just as it did every day in Afghanistan, and Bucky easily kept up. Finally, smiling confidently at each other, Steve and Bucky advanced to the Remington 12-gauge shotgun. They knew they had everyone beat. Steve couldn't help himself though. He took the shotgun and cocked the barrel back with one quick thrust, just as he looked over to the group. Most of the group laughed and started groaning at the 2 idiots in front of them. Natasha realized Steve's whole purpose of showing off was so he could stare straight at her while everyone else rolled their eyes. She blushed and he grinned. The men disassembled their shotguns quickly, stood back, and said, "Done." Fury rolled his eyes and said, "Military boys and their guns." Seriously though, as much as I hate to admit it, impressive. Rogers. Barnes. You both had the fastest times today. Good God, you two are imbeciles. You know that, right? Marie said. I have a few other words that might fit their description. Wanda joined in. Everyone else moved to the wrestling mats and boxing ring for the afternoon, while Rogers moved closer to Natasha and said, "What, Romanoff?" No comment. Then Natasha moved closer herself, so only he could hear. She placed her hand on his bicep and said, "I knew you do be good, but are you sure you weren't overcompensating, soldier?" She grinned at him as she ran off toward the boxing ring. His cocky smile was wiped away instantly. The class was split for the next 2 exercises. Half went to the boxing ring and the other half went to the wrestling mat for hand-to-hand combat. Their group approached the boxing ring first. Agent Carlson was waiting for them and said loudly, "All right, everyone, today is not about winning. I know that that's hard to believe. It is about being assessed in each of these skills so we can appropriately rate you. I don't want to see any black eyes or blood in the ring, got it?" Each pair of trainees stepped into the ring when their turn came up. Carlson's team assessed the trainees on speed, agility, knowledge of surroundings, and power and strength. The rating scale ranged beginner to advanced to expert. Carlson made people switch up partners in his drill. Everyone but the last duo had gone. Maximoff, Loki, and Banner were at beginner status. Thor, Stark, Rhodes, and Barnes were all advanced, while Wilson and Rogers were both expert. Romanoff was last and was paired against Hill. Steve looked up to see Natasha whisper to Maria, "I am sorry." Steve had a suspicion telling her that was a mistake. His suspicions were verified when Sam nudged him and said, "If you and Romanoff would have been in the lobby of the hotel drinking before we came here, you would have known that Hill was in the New York Police Department before this and boxed as a hobby. She is going to be all sorts of pissed off." The phrase "float like a butterfly, sting like a bee" came into Steve's mind as he saw the 2 women go at it. Their feet were swift, their punches were tight, and the turns of their bodies were fluid. They both got a couple of hard hits in initially before they fell in sync with their rhythm and timing. All of a sudden, it looked like they were moving in slow motion. Natasha caught Maria in the stomach with a solid punch, and they stepped back from each other for a second. Everyone thought Carlson would call it since he had said no bruises or blood today. But when Steve looked over, he was smiling in admiration at the two fighters. Their heels dug in as their dance switched into a higher gear. Hearing their movements, grunts, and moans had everyone around the ring in a trance. Maria moved left, moved right, and then went for a hook with her right arm. Natasha moved away, but Hill anticipated it. Maria punched her hard with her left fist square in the jaw, causing her mouth guard and a little blood to tumble out of her lips. A collective view came from the class. Natasha found her footing and moved against Hill. She was quicker than Maria all of a sudden and landed 4 succinct hits to her stomach before connecting a hard right punch to Hill's shoulder. Carlson finally stepped in and said, "Great job, ladies. Expert level. Maybe you can show everyone else how to improve." Both women shook off their hits and double-tapped their fists together. Maria told Natasha, "Thanks for that motivation right at the beginning, Romanoff. Anytime you want to dance in here, let me know. I think we'd be a good match." Natasha nodded and stared at Steve as she took off the padding on her head and gloves. He walked over to her and said, "Nice moves, Romanoff, but you weren't overcompensating, were you?" Natasha rubbed her jaw as she smirked. "No need for me to do that. Maybe I can teach you a few things sometime." Agent Melinda May was waiting for them on the wrestling mats. "Okay, final drill for the day. Hand-to-hand combat. Doesn't have rules like boxing. It simulates real life. And in real life, when someone comes at you with a knife or a gun, your goal isn't to avoid the ropes." Carlson had come to stand next to her. He smiled when she started comparing her drill to his boxing assessment, but it was quickly erased from his face when Agent May knocked him off of his feet in one swift move and put her foot on his chest as she continued, "It has to stay alive and survive until you can gain the advantage over your opponent. Let us see what you all got." Apparently Melinda May was not someone to mess around, or to mess around with. Most of the class was rated at beginner levels along with Maximoff, Banner, and Loki. Maximoff and Banner appeared timid during their drill, and Loki, while outmatched, did show his spirit by getting in a couple of quick and cheap shots. A smaller group from the class, along with Hill, Stark, Rhodes, Thor, and Wilson were rated advanced. Rogers and Bucky were next. "Good luck," they both said as they tapped their fists. Bucky landed the first blow with a swift kick to Steve's stomach that knocked him down. He moved away quickly as Steve groaned and hopped up quickly and grinned. "A nice move, Buck." He charged toward Bucky and tucked his body down toward the mat, rolling in a somersault and landing directly behind Barnes. Before Bucky could turn around, Steve swept his leg from his crouched position and knocked Bucky flat on his back. Steve made his final move over his friend as he twisted his arm, rolled him on his stomach, and pinned him to the mat. This hadn't been the first time they sparred against each other, and wouldn't he come close to being the last. May's voice came through as Steve helped Bucky up from the mat and patted him on the shoulders. Barnes advanced. Rogers expert. Natasha still had to go, only she was a woman without a partner. An odd woman out was the saying, and she felt it as everyone stared at her. Melinda May noticed the last person to go and grinned. Carlson said to her, "Take it easy, May." She looked back at him and just said, "Oh Phil, sometimes we get to have a little fun too, don't we? I want to see if the new girl is as good as she really thinks she is." Carlson rubbed his eyes and shook his head as he went and stood at the edge of the mat. She turned her attention and said, "Today is your lucky day, Miss Romanoff." Natasha's face reddened a little from the hard blow that Maria landed on her in the boxing ring, but her stern expression didn't give off the appearance of being in pain. She looked annoyed from being challenged by the teacher. May had apparently seen Natasha and Maria's boxing match, and since Romanoff was without a partner at the moment, she wanted to test the potential and ability of the trainee. Everyone was tired and ready for the day to be over, but the student versus teacher challenge appearing in front of everyone had sparked a new level of interest. Natasha moved to the centre. Steve heard her tell May, funny, "Luck isn't he going to play any part in what is about to happen?" May smirked as they both nodded. She charged toward Romanoff first. May's fist connected to Natasha's shoulder, drawing her weight off balance as she stumbled backwards on the mat. May continued to move on her, but Natasha narrowed her eyes and let out a breath as she blocked Melinda's kick at her own stomach, grabbing her ankle in the process. Romanoff's grip tightened as she used the weight of her body to twist May's leg until she fell to the ground, now lying flat on her back. "What the hell is going on, Carlson?" Fury said, and now stood by his training agent as Carlson answered, "Mayes assessing the situation, sir." "Assessing my ass," Fury answered. Natasha closed in as May rolled her body and popped up and stood against her opponent again. This time Romanoff ran towards May. The women moved in rapid movement. Missed kicks and hands moved through the air as they blocked each other's actions. Their groans and the sound of hands blocking fists and feet obstructing kicks filled the air like a syncopated beat. They moved around the circle on the mat, showing off their reaction and fighting skills to each other and to the group that stood around them like an MMA match was occurring. May's foot finally connected with Romanoff's back while she was turning away. "Ouch," Wanda spoke as if she were voicing Natasha's words for her. Everyone knew at this point that Natasha was going to be ranked in the highest category. Her impressive stamina, skills, and ability were exposed as she went toe-to-toe with the intimidating presence of Melinda May. Natasha was not to be intimidated easily though. That was something Steve and all of her classmates were learning quickly about her. Thanks for listening to our 3 dubs. A huge thank you to 80s-Kat for creating this incredible story. Be sure to check out their work for more amazing content. And special thanks to NC for providing the background footage that brought this narration to life. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Until next time, happy listening and keep imagining.